Great. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back from your lunch, or good morning, or good evening, wherever you might be. We really do appreciate everybody adjusting their schedules, adjusting their time to be a part of this meeting and to be able to come together virtually. Hopefully, we'll be able to be together again in person before too long. Loretta is called away to another obligation at the moment, so she asked me to step in to introduce Prakash Nagakadi in this session on jurisdictional and institutional strategies for COVID-19. And what we've been doing every time we get together for the last year or so is really just checking in to hear about how the pandemic has impacted your work, how institutions have responded and jurisdictions have responded to the pandemic to keep pushing forward on our shared mission. And so in this case, we asked Prakash to put together a session. He's the Vice President for Research at the University of South Carolina and currently the head of our Council of Program Directors. And so he agreed to solicit input from other folks around our community and pull that together and have a good discussion today. And so I'm happy to hand it over to Prakash.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Thank you as well as Loretta for giving us the opportunity to discuss, how we are emerging out of this COVID-19 pandemic through novel strategies as well as through, resilience. So I want to thank all the PDPIs who volunteered to talk today. I think we have selected about 9 speakers, and they are from Guam to North Dakota and from West Virginia to Nebraska. So they represent a wide array of jurisdictions and institutions as well. So what we have decided to do is, each one is going to present only like one slide, and I request each speaker just to highlight your strategies in just maybe 3 to 4 minutes, so that in the next 40 to 45 minutes, we can complete this presentation, followed by another 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A. And I really appreciate Tim being here. If you all have any questions about questions related to COVID-19, he's there to address those questions on behalf of NSF EPSCoR. So again, thank you all, and thanks for your participation in this particular session. So let me get started with the first slide, if you don't mind presenting the first one. Yeah, the next slide, please. Okay, so I thought I will start with the South Carolina EPSCoR, like how COVID-19 has impacted the state of South Carolina, as well as how we have been able to develop some novel strategies as well. So one of the most important things that I felt that came out of COVID-19 was our ability to collaborate amongst not only the comprehensive research universities, but also the healthcare system. Like we have one of the largest healthcare systems is called as the Prisma Health, and they are like a private institution, private hospital system. But what happened was that because there was growing need for us to come up with novel strategies to overcome this COVID-19 related issues, that we, along with Clemson and as well as MUSC and some other institutions as well, that we actually sought for opportunities to collaborate. And one of the things, for example, they said was, that there were not enough ventilators. And so by forming what is called as the Bioengineering Working Group, we were able to come up with the 3D printing of the respirators and ventilators, so that one ventilator can be used by more than one patient. So that was huge in the beginning. But also we were able to work with the biomedical engineering group to come up with the portable negative pressure enclosures so that we can safely transport patients. So that was highly significant as well. We also try to make use of faculty who are working at the AI Institute and in tracking the social media in terms of how are they responding to the various CDC recommendations and things like that. So just to gather information on trying to see, like how many people are, trying to comply with CDC guidelines versus not. So there's a lot of interinstitutional as well as interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary collaborations that resulted from this COVID-19. In addition, we took this opportunity to the VPR from Clemson, USC, and MUSC were able to fund a lot of internal projects, to do with COVID-19, so that they can generate the preliminary data that would be useful, or that would be used to secure larger grants to do the research on COVID-19 and applying for NSF, NIH, and other types of grants. So that was a huge success as well, because those who received these awards were able to successfully compete to get secure larger grants. USC and Clemson also developed the saliva-based COVID assay, which we could use it for students, faculty, and staff to test them. But also we were able to develop the wastewater testing for COVID-19, so that we could identify which of the student housing, for example, is showing high degree of infection, so that we could go and mitigate that. So that was significant as well. And then we also developed strategies to prepare ourselves for the long haulers, the long COVID-19, because as we know, that's a significant portion of the people who get COVID and were hospitalized and all that, they suffer from PTSD, neurological defects, as well as immunological functional defects and all that. So we help support that kind of research as well. In terms of education and leadership, we were able to, because we could not have in-person meeting or face-to-face meetings, we converted everything into virtual meetings. We organized a 7-week seminar series in which we allowed undergrad students, grad students, and faculty who are engaged in the NSF Track 1. Our NSF Track 1 is on materials research, and we are using the MGI initiative. So the faculty started giving presentations on what kind of research they are doing and how are they using the MGI approach to address their materials research and all that, which was very much appreciated by all the undergrad students as well as the grad students. And they also got an opportunity to present their research. HBCUs, we engaged them in organizing the virtual high school summer research experience, for example, at Claflin University. We also started collaborating with the South Carolina INRE program, so that we are co-hosting academic leadership and career development workshops instead of trying to duplicate and having, putting in twice the amount of work. We decided to have this, trying to co-host. And lastly, I want to highlight for undergraduates to get the experience, Clemson started what is called as COVID Challenge, in which faculty from across the entire state would serve as mentors for undergrad students who are interested in doing virtual research project on COVID-19. So there was a huge participation from the undergrad students, as well as the faculty were able to mentor them as well. So in summary, therefore, I would say that, initially it was very tough, but nonetheless, I think the most important thing that emerged out of this was that, it led novel ways to have educational programs being delivered, but at the same time, it led to a lot of interdisciplinary and interinstitutional collaborations. So I'll stop there and I'll move on to the next slide and invite Dr. Suzanne Strait from West Virginia to give her presentation, followed by others are going to be coming on board as well. So thank you. Suzanne?
Thank you. Can you see my slide? Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yes.
I'm going to tell you about one specific project as opposed to the overview for the state, but I'd like to highlight this one. West Virginia's Track 1 at Marshall University includes a mentoring partnership between research faculty, high school students, and high school teachers. One of our chemistry faculty, Michael Norton, seen in this virtual room in the pink, both adapted the planned topic from blood glucose to COVID-19 structure, and additionally was able to adapt from the typical in-person chemistry lab to a virtual space. The objective was to design a prototype lateral flow assay pregnancy test-like system for COVID-19. In this slide, you can see them in their shared virtual room In addition to Dr. Norton, you can see the high school teacher in black and 3 of the high school students, a junior, a sophomore, and a senior, in the center interacting in this virtual space. They use the virtual reality software Nano, which enables molecular modeling and virtual reality learning experiences. This virtual lab allowed students to build and manipulate models of molecules that would be used in their laboratory experiments when they were able to return to a traditional lab. The VR experience was also supplemented with materials sent to their homes so the students could do hands-on reinforcing experiments. In this image, you can see the molecule above them and their hands below. Their hands can move around this virtual space and be used to manipulate the model or interact with the command screens you see on the right side of the slide. When the students put on their virtual reality glasses, they're able to step inside the molecule, communicate with each other, and manipulate the molecule in real time. Student researchers viewed molecular models in this virtual space that enabled discussions of bond angles, molecular mechanisms, and the reactions at the atomic and molecular scale for COVID-19 spike proteins and glucose sensing. The project was adapted to be virtual rather than a laboratory-based experience, and video conferencing was used for many of the discussions and background development. With students located miles apart, yet working together virtually, this was an unexpected positive outcome considering the isolation required by COVID-19. The students took very naturally to this VR software and were really excited with the venue. And I think having something new and exciting during this time was a really positive experience for all of them. Thank you.
Thank you. The next presenter is Dr. Terry Donaldson from GOM.
Thanks, Prakash. Good day, everyone. I'd like to point out a couple of things. First, Guam is, its economy is based largely on tourism. As you might imagine, we have no tourism to speak of these days. We haven't had tourism for well over a year, except for accidental tourism, like when an aircraft carrier full of infected sailors pulls into port. Our hotels actually breathed a relief for a bit of the time. But generally speaking, it's been a hard go, and this caused a lot of difficulties for the community, but we always have a way of bouncing back. We suffer from typhoons, we suffer from earthquakes from time to time. We're used to relative isolation. We don't complain about wearing masks because we're close to Asia, and people in Asia wear masks when they have to because of infectious diseases, etc. So generally we pitch in together with each other and take care of business. And this extends to the University of Guam, which is the only institution in our jurisdiction that essentially benefits from support from our current project, the GECKO project. Instruction takes place often remotely, but sometimes in carefully spaced out situations in labs or in open areas out on the coral reef, which is conveniently located behind our marine laboratory. But Guam in general, is the second thing, is seen as being the tip of the spear as far as strategic interests for the United States are concerned. It's also the very end of the line when it comes to things like procurement, all right? And this has been a problem under normal circumstances to some extent, with COVID and also with delays with the Postal Service that were engineered or otherwise put in play. It's taken a lot longer for us to get what we need to do. So we're used to dealing with these kinds of situations, and so we plan ahead in order to try to schedule procurement actions that they can deliver the goods for us by the time we are ready to use the equipment and supplies that we need. We have a problem with recruiting graduate students, postdocs, and research scientists for the project, again, because of COVID restrictions. People are a little hesitant about coming all the way out here and then getting slammed in quarantine for a couple of weeks. Even if it is in a nice hotel down by the beach, you can't go to the beach. And we have to work through various types of issues that the government puts in play for us in order to bring people in and bring them in a timely manner and then get them working. We've had some successes, and we've also had not failures, but just delays. And so we roll with the punches. All right. We tend to try to do our searches well in advance of when the position actually becomes active. simply because we want to make sure that people can get here and participate, or if local folks want to participate in some of our activities, they know where to go, when to go, and how they can do it and work safely on the matters at hand. And because of our position way out here, we sometimes have to recruit foreign nationals to certain positions, let's say postdoctoral fellowships. And those foreign nationals have to deal with the COVID restrictions that are in play in their country, but also in play at the U.S. consulate and located in the city, or in the embassy in the city where they're applying from. And so again, we plan ahead for delays, work the system, and keep a smile on our faces, because the alternative is you're not going to get anything done. And we believe in getting things done. And thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you, Terry. The next speaker is Dr. Kelly Rush from North Dakota.
All right, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right, so my approach, we're going to take a few minutes to discuss how we move forward in a hybrid environment, even post-COVID. North Dakota, we began our track one last summer in the height of COVID. And so you can imagine beginning a track one award under the best of circumstances, but when all the universities are closed, people aren't traveling. Starting up a new track one brings with it many barriers and obstacles we had to overcome. And so we did as much as we could, and we turned to the virtual environment. And some folks' views of the virtual environment is once COVID's gone, we go back to regular life. But what we found out throughout this process is that there are aspects of it that have allowed us to reach a broader audience and have a greater impact that we will incorporate going forward into all of our programming. So if we look at the use of best practices, we did switch to the Forger One Symposium platform for our annual conference this year. We had 250 actual registered participants, but we had 2,118 visits to that platform. What it also allowed us to do was run 3 concurrent simultaneous tracks at the same time. Normally we are face-to-face. Folks have to travel. It's about 350 miles from Fargo to Dickinson, the other side of the state. And so we always had difficulty with faculty and students being able to travel across the state, particularly during the school year, classes and things like that. So this format really allowed us to reach people that normally could not get to the face-to-face conference. But I think one of the most important things we saw from it, we opened up the platform 2 weeks before our actual conference date of April 14th and allowed registrants to interact with the posters that were pre-recorded. So each post, and we had 85% of the posters were presented by students. So each student had to record their poster, talk about their poster. We loaded all that, and it allowed folks to go in and take a look at the posters ahead of time. And they actually we received 331 different comments, unique comments to our poster presenters, and then on the virtual day brought the poster presenters back together for further dialogue. And the response we got, particularly from the students, is they really enjoyed that aspect, to be able to have the dialogue, answer questions, and they felt they got more out of it by having it online and virtual versus being at a face-to-face conference. So we'll be looking to, for our annual conferences in the future, maybe continue with this approach because we actually were able to reach more people and have more engagement. We launched our first Science Cafe, and because of COVID-19 impacts on getting our initial research for our track one up and running, the researchers didn't feel they were ready to present a Science Cafe focused on the topic of NDASIS. And so we did turn it to and used experts within the state of COVID-19 vaccines. And so while we had officially 39 registrants, we again used the Forger One platform, we actually had 271 visits to that platform, and over 50% of those visits were from the general public, which is the purpose of a Science Cafe. So again, we're looking at avenues for all of our future Science Cafes to do them online like this as a means to really get out into the public within the state of North Dakota. And then from a increased level of flexibility to have an agile response, our main thing, we do a lot of our STEM outreach in the summer, our main STEM program of nature, which works with our tribal communities. There are 4 programs. We have the University Summer Camp, which is at the research universities for TCU students. We have the tribal college summer camps, which are on the tribal colleges, at the tribal colleges themselves, which have middle high school students. We have our bridge program for just recently graduated tribal students before they go into college. And then we have our Sunday academies. Since universities were closed and no one was traveling, everything we did last summer and everything we are doing this summer will be virtual, except for one tribal college summer camp. They're bound and determined to hold it face-to-face. So there were initial discussions that should we just cancel our nature programming for last summer. And in talking with our tribal partners, particularly the faculty at their tribal colleges and presidents, they were adamant that we must maintain these activities because they feared, and without nature programming, that they would lose a cohort of students along the way. And so we did everything virtual. So last summer, we packaged and delivered 145 STEM kits. And each kit contained 5 informal STEM activities, anywhere from denaturing protein to microbiology of bacteria, the list, creating circuits using lemons. And we actually sent those tests, we packaged them, EPSCoR packaged them, we sent them to, within 3 tribal communities to a central location, and then in 2 tribal communities, we literally sent them to the students' homes. And then we doubled up with that online virtual, the faculty leading the online virtual activity. So the students worked either at that central location within 3 of the communities, or they worked at home with their parent supervision, and they went through these STEM activities over the course of last summer and this academic year, along with the virtual learning through videos. And we will be doing that again this year, along with our university summer camp and our TCU summer camp and our bridge camps will all be online and virtual. And the last thing focused on research, faculty and student training. Again, our faculty and students could not travel, particularly for our primary undergrad institution or master's universities, being able to travel, come to the research university, learn protocols adopted by the overall NDASIS research team. That has really stymied some of our faculty getting up and going with their students. And so this summer we are creating training videos to record various standardized protocols and techniques that have been adopted for our track 1. And those will be available for all students across our state, all faculty across our state to utilize, learn from, help the students get up to speed within their labs. So our message is going forward that we're not going to use COVID-19, thank you, it's over, move forward face-to-face. We are looking for ways to create and keep that hybrid environment, because we truly believe we reached a broader audience and have had a greater impact to date by bringing in some folks that historically did not have access because they would have to travel to one of the universities.
Thank you, Kelly. The next speaker is Dr. Brad Kinsley from New Hampshire.
Prakash, I do not see Brad here. This is Michelle.
Oh, okay. Okay. Maybe
you want to
then,
wait a little bit? We'll see if he turns up, and if he doesn't, I could deliver the slide.
so you can present this?
I can present this. Right now I have a lawnmower behind my window, right next to my window. So maybe a few minutes later would be better.
Okay, so maybe we'll move on to the next slide and then we'll come back to this again. Yeah. So the next presenter is Dr. Mel Ustad from South Dakota. Mel?
Good afternoon or good morning, whatever the case might be for you. South Dakota experienced many of the same challenges that have been presented earlier, but we are entering our, middle of our first year of track one, and most of these activities had been planned to be face-to-face, or like we had planned a number of teacher workshops, and we were going to do those spread out across the state regionally. But we transitioned that and really all of these activities, outreach activities, to virtual activities. And the teacher workshop, we had hoped, or our goal was to have 180 teachers participate. And actually we had 120 sign up to participate, which was well ahead of what we wanted, and ended up with 181 that completed the workshops. And the other, I guess, highlight of that was our focus in the grant especially was on rural and native communities. And the map here shows the gray and colored areas are native communities or reservations throughout South Dakota. And the different dots show where the participants came from. And so we had 71 teachers come from rural or native schools, a significant number of those from the tribal communities and schools. So we were very happy with that. And our finding was that by doing it virtually, we actually had more participation from those rural and tribal communities. And the teachers that participated in it, I would say overwhelmingly endorsed or liked the virtual format. I mean, we had to change it and lengthen the times and shorter times each day. So it was modified to fit that need, but it was very successful. And so actually this year we are going to continue, even though things have opened up somewhat. We're going to do all of our workshops again. Teacher workshops are going to be virtual. And then in the future, I think what we will do is we will keep some virtual and some hands-on in regional areas. So, it forced us to do it, but it actually turned out that to be a positive, I think, in terms of the participation and making us to think a little bit differently on how we do things. Another aspect that we did was, we normally, as probably most states do, have a number of face-to-face, all investigator meetings or meetings of a number of participants in different areas, which we couldn't do. So we moved those to virtual meetings. And again, we kind of found out that because of they are virtual, we don't need to travel to locations to do that. And it just became much easier to schedule them, and people responded and participated because they didn't have to spend, a whole day, basically, in many cases, or even more than a day, traveling to the meeting and back and so forth. So one of the things we did was we developed a monthly series of mentoring sessions focused on our new faculty hires, postdocs, graduate students. We also, again, because of the virtual nature of these things, we involved other EPSCoR folks in it. So for example, the Track 2 awards we're involved with were involved in the mentoring opportunities and so forth. So again, it enabled more flexibility. I think made the interactions easier. The interactions changed. You didn't have the face-to-face one-on-one interactions that you have in a regular meeting or facility, but we found that it was very helpful. And going forward, we're going to continue to use virtual meetings and virtual presentations much more frequently, but also go back to having face-to-face meetings periodically to supplement those things. Again, we experienced many of the same things that Guam and others did, with just challenges with travel and getting, you know, visas and things. We had institutions buy equipment, and the equipment arrived, but the people that were going to had to come travel to install it weren't able to travel. So we have equipment sitting in a lab that doesn't work because they haven't been able to travel yet. So those are all challenges I think everybody's seeing, but you know, we have to plan and try and work around them. So those are some of the experiences we had. Obviously there were challenges, but I think being forced to do some things differently has actually benefited the project and us in general. You know, it's been tough, but it's also been rewarding to learn some new things and do some things differently.
Yeah. Thank you, Mel. That was great. So the next speaker is Dr. Jeff Botham from Rhode Island.
Hello. All right, I think I'm on. Okay. Yeah, so you know, there's a lot of similarities with our state and some of the other states and jurisdictions. So I just wanted to focus on the kind of the post-COVID resilience and innovation aspect of it. And in terms of engagement, training, and participation, we have a career development program across our 8 institutions within Rhode Island, and this is for graduate students, postdocs, as well as undergraduate students, particularly at PUI institutions. And this is a kind of a workshop-based certificate program. And so, like many of the other activities that have been discussed, this also went virtual. And what's really cool about this is it now gives us a library of recorded workshops given by experts in their field that we can make available online and then use for future activities. At the undergraduate level, we of course were impacted last summer, and we typically bring in around 40 undergraduate students to work across our 8 institutions. And so it really had to go hybrid or remote or hybrid in some cases for some of the field work. And we were going to pilot, and we did pilot a SURF Flex. This is our Summer Undergraduate Research Fellowship Flex program. This originally was created for students who have different personal obligations or family obligations or work obligations, who want a summer research experience but may only be able to dedicate 10 to 20 hours per week in the summer. So we have mentors who are excited to offer students such an experience, and we have students sign up for it, and that's pretty adaptable and customizable. So I think moving forward, hopefully we don't go through too many more of these, but those types of flexible options I think are something that we can use. In terms of some of our communication and coordination, so we have an all hands meeting, and this time around, the pandemic also coincided with a real awareness of social justice. And so we dedicated our entire all hands meeting to discussing this, to screening a film called Can We Talk? It's about a sense of belonging and barriers to underrepresented minorities in STEM fields. And I think in person, this would have been very different. So having to go virtual and offer it that way, we had on the order of 100 people from our EPSCoR community attend this, and it was really well received. We also had our virtual symposia and external advisory board meeting just recently, and much like I believe it was North Dakota, we had pre-recorded 2-minute soundbite talks that students made available, and these were released over the course of about 2 weeks ahead of the symposia. So not all at once. So we would release 2 at a time, and then there was a mechanism for viewers to pose questions and to provide some feedback. And ultimately, I think what we've learned is that moving forward with a hybrid or an alternative mechanism is really going to benefit engagement and training. And, we're kind of committed to that. We see our audiences larger than they might be otherwise. In terms of infrastructure and productivity within our state, one kind of side benefit is related to core facilities, core research facilities. Of course, with the halt in research activities, these facilities were not generating user fees. So we've always, I'm sure many of you have always been, working with our senior leadership to try to sustain research core facilities, and this was a big wake-up call. It's critical to have a plan in place for events such as pandemics. There has to be a way to keep these institutions viable and to keep the staff hired and trained, et cetera. Another aspect, and this is related a little bit to some of these SURF projects, those undergraduate research projects, we learned to adopt more data analytics and machine learning into our projects. Some of what we work on, it's coastal ecosystems and climate change. And so these are big sets of data. And we, of course, been looking at data analytics, but from a sensor development perspective, kind of forcing the issue and thinking creatively and doing remote projects based on machine learning has opened up some new doors for us in handling complex sensor spectra, for instance. And then finally, when we welcome students, staff and faculty, back into the research labs, it requires a certain level of sensitivity. Not everybody from a pandemic perspective has the same comfort level in jumping back in and in getting to work. And so we've had to think about how to be inclusive in that respect, but also that ties into the idea of inclusive mentoring to better support the recruiting, retention, and training of all students in our laboratory environments, and ultimately what this yields is happy and productive students. So thank you very much.
Sorry, I was muted. Thanks, Jeff. So now the next speaker is Dr. Matt Andrews from Nebraska.
Thank you, Prakash. I think we're all familiar with the old Broadway phrase, the show must go on. Well, in Nebraska, faced with COVID-19, we made the decision that the STEM must go on. And the idea there was the importance of broadening participation during the pandemic. And the period I'm talking about was really kind of the height of the pandemic. It was last summer. And so a school out of session, and we had all these activities planned through our Young Nebraska Scientist program. And these include things like science camps, other interactions with faculty, targeting pretty much middle schoolers, high schoolers, and undergraduates. We decided that these things still have to happen, but we would have to do things a little bit differently. And so this was an important aspect of our track one. And the track one is the Center for Root and Rhizobiome Innovation. So these are all these plant scientists at various universities around Nebraska, and they came up with some fairly innovative strategies for broadening participation and involving this group of middle school, high school, and undergraduate students. So the one I'd really like to bring your attention to initially is this one on the top right here, where the crop microbiomes in your backyard. And so this involved high school students that were sent a package of materials, a kit, so that they could set up their own 10 by 10 foot plot in their own backyard, and with instruction from faculty at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, how they could actually plant crops, gather data, and really contribute scientifically, provide results, things that could eventually be published. And so this was something that could be done in the safety of one's backyard. So it was really like bringing STEM to them in a very safe manner. Our YNS camps, again, YNS, Young Nebraska Scientist Camps, became online. And so we were able to do that for a few camps And again, this is grades 6 through 12, so that that middle school, high school students could participate in these activities that they had signed up for back in January, pre-COVID. But we still felt that the need to continue with these, and so they were offered also. Some camps had to be canceled, but we made a concerted effort for certain ones to continue despite COVID-19. And finally, we continued with our REU program. And so this is where we normally would bring undergraduates to Nebraska to work with university researchers in the state. And this did have to go online. But I was really proud with the sort of innovative ways that you could have an REU experience remotely. And from what I could tell from the assessments I had, from the posters I saw, this was also a success. So I'm really proud of our Nebraska EPSCoR staff here in my office, but also proud of all of these university and college faculty throughout the state who came up with all these innovative strategies so that we could broaden participation during the pandemic, and that the STEM could go on. And so those are the sorts of things that we did last summer that I'm grateful I had a chance to share with you right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. I like that STEM must go on. So next speaker is Dr. Julie Jordan from Mississippi.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. So in Mississippi, I think like many of the others, our experience was similar. We found ways to adapt rather quickly, and were able to keep everything on track. And we even had 2 new faculty start in August that were able to get their programs up and going as part of our EPSCoR program. But like most, we have learned to, I think, leverage the new comfort level we have with virtual meetings and the hybrid formats. And in that, we have been able to do things like others have mentioned, host our annual conference. And we think actually had, really nice, broader participation than maybe we would had people had to drive there, in particular from our steering committees and our science advisory board. The other thing that we added in trying to figure out how to get more professional development out in this landscape was very just sort of what we call lunch and learns, but they were virtual. So it turned out that doing something like that was an easy way for industry partners and to reach and connect with the students and faculty. And because for an industry person who's now used to as well getting online for meetings, it was easy for them to hop online for an hour and make a presentation and take Q&A from the students and faculty. We were able to add in this environment a communicating science workshop for our students. And even we're able to, along the lines of trying to focus on better communication and helping our students become better communicators of science, hosted special sessions for the students around making poster presentations. So like others, I think going forward, we will certainly going to keep our opportunities to broaden our reach and enhance our professional development, education, and training with the hybrid formats. I think that more broadly speaking, I kind of addressed sort of at our institution some of the things I think that have resulted from the year. We see, I think, a more emphasis on our campuses in how we respond to rural community resilience in areas of health disparities and racial equity in our state. I think we find that across all of our institutions in our state. Many more conversations have resulted in this, and I absolutely think that's a positive outcome from the year. We're also looking at ways that we can use remote work to address some of our staffing needs. Before COVID, in most cases, like a lot of other places, we expected people to move and relocate to take jobs, and I think that there's a whole new thinking going on with a lot more conversation to take place and what that means for our institution. But there are more than one, and I really appreciate the way the entire group of presenters today and the EPSCoR and the approach as leaders that we're taking to find the positives coming out of this COVID and looking for ways to become more resilient. So Thank you very much, and I appreciate the chance to share some.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. Let's see, is Brad Kinsley here? Has he joined? If not, Michelle, do you want to present?
Yes, please. Can you go back to that slide?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
sure.
slide number 6, I think.
That's it.
Yes.
Our track one is New Hampshire BioMade, and our focus is the development of techniques and strategies to advance manufacturing for biomaterials, such as those that would be used in the human body, such as implants for joints, or tissue engineering, skull fractures and traumas, machine materials to repair those wounds, that sort of thing. So our partners are, it's led by UNH, and our partners are at Dartmouth College on the other side of the state. And even though New Hampshire is a much smaller state than North Dakota or many of the other EPSCoR states, it still takes about 2 hours to connect between the two organizations. Another research partner is at Keene State College in the other end of the state. And we have partners through the community colleges of New Hampshire, which has 7 campuses. That's all 2-year colleges. So we are somewhat dispersed. It's not all at the University of New Hampshire. And many of our graduate students are foreign nationals. They're international students, and they found themselves here and rather isolated in all of these campuses. And suddenly, you know, everything was shut down. Nobody could work in the labs. They talked to our evaluators, and our evaluators made a very good suggestion to see if we could come up with a way to bring our students together virtually in a way that was effective. It was more than just doing a writing lab or something that they could already have done. So they developed a self-organized, self-governed graduate student organization, which now has grown to include our undergraduates, as well as our transfer scholars, who are students who come from the 2-year programs in the community colleges to the 4-year programs. And they would also sometimes feel somewhat disconnected. So the graduate student organization serves all of those students. And they've been doing some community building through remote learning. So this is one of the great advantages of moving to our virtual environment. These students work together. They have a leadership team of 4 students, and they put on a series of 10 seminars. The last one wrapped up today. And they will be developing a workshop for students in August. They received a seed grant to do some outreach during Advanced Manufacturing Month in October, and they are going to host one of our virtual industry mixers. So again, the pandemic had an impact on our industrial partnerships, which is key to our whole project. So we were not able to put very many interns into companies. Everything shut down last summer, of course. And still there is quite a bit of reticence to open up industry settings to high schoolers and community college students. So we pivoted and came up with another way to bring industry to our researchers and researchers to our industry partners. We are going to hold our first industry mixer in the beginning of June, all virtual, and we have another one planned for the fall, and a third one in the winter or late fall will be hosted by the graduate student organization. And these industry mixers are virtual events. There'll be speed talks by industry and by faculty in this instance. The students will do their own talks in the fall, and we'll have breakouts for discussion, similar to the symposium that Kelly described. So we're pretty excited about that. We're very happy to see the graduate student organization serving the students and bringing them together in a virtual environment during this very difficult year. Another key component to New Hampshire BioMade is the distribution of seed grants. We have some pretty nice seed grant opportunities that hope to bring in faculty at smaller colleges and community colleges and high schools who have not been involved in the project originally. And so it's a way to distribute our reach. And of course, that was difficult to do. So the seed grant projects we had granted were extended for 6 months, and we're beginning to see some results. And so those were some of the changes that we made with New Hampshire BioMade. And going forward, we may keep some of these hybrid approaches. At the University of New Hampshire, UNH became the go-to place in New Hampshire for COVID testing. They threw up a brand new lab and did a lot of testing for state agencies, for nursing homes, in addition to the university. Comprehensive testing program. Once students were able to return to campus, students were tested twice a week, faculty and staff once per week. And that is continuing, even though people are being vaccinated. So a very cautious approach in terms of testing. And as a result, university numbers of infection were relatively low. And people were able to open up their labs last summer in an incremental way, with labs being fully open, I believe, by the fall. The university also has developed a team to take a look at what faculty with family responsibilities are feeling, how they're being impacted in the work-life balance and trying and challenged by those. So there is a serious effort by the university administration to assess the needs of faculty and other researchers and to identify items to be implemented to address those problems. One thing we did not put on the slide, but I picked up because I'm working on the annual report. Tim, you'll be very pleased to hear that. The university has a research communications academy that was in the past in person and featured some work by outside presenters such as the Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science. Again, it pivoted to a virtual environment and it took advantage of that to put together a new program about how to effectively communicate in a virtual environment and brought in speakers to help to bolster those skills for people, not just at UNH, but for our partner institutions. We threw this open to all of the PUIs in the state and had really good turnout. Over 100 people came to one of the main sessions. So again, this is a hybrid approach that maybe will be continued because it did have benefits. That's all we have from New Hampshire.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Michelle. So I guess that completes the presentation by various speakers. I really want to thank all of them. And, we just heard, I think, like everybody, how they've been using the virtual platform to deliver research for undergrad students, grad students, and all that, without compromising to the best of their abilities, without compromising the qualities. That was pretty amazing to see that. So we have just about 7 minutes, and if we can open it up for discussion. If anybody has any questions to Tim, or to NSF, feel free to send those questions out, and I think there will be somebody who will read those, and I'm sure Tim would be happy to answer as well. Or if you want to share something that's unique to your jurisdiction or institution, please feel free to share that as well. Thank you.
Wonderful presentation. Thank you to all the facilitators for this presentation. At this time, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. You can also unmute yourself and ask a question. We do have a comment in the chat. It says, thanks for sharing your experiences. Since T1 Awards have strong collaborations with underrepresented institutions, I was wondering if any of you were able to identify any additional or particular challenges that those institutions might have and how they handled it. One example that comes to mind is faculty struggling with their heavy academic workload and having enough time to research activities.
Anybody wants to share their experiences working with HBCUs or other minority institutions?
Prakash, I can share a little bit. It wasn't a major situation in Montana, but we probably some of the hardest hit areas contained our tribal colleges or reservations in Montana. And we have a very good working relationship with Little Bighorn College. And what happened there is they shut down. Basically, we just reoriented pretty much all of their funding to support their technological needs for remote teaching. And so it wasn't a major thing, but it allowed, we were allowed to be that flexible because that's what they needed the most at that time rather than the research funds.
Right. We had a similar situation with some of our collaborating HBCUs where they were pretty much shut down, and they were trying to find out if their students can be paid and they can participate in the summer research experiences, and so we did allow some of those students to participate as well, because of the virtual format. Otherwise we would not have been able to do that. So yes, but I think some of the HBCUs that we were collaborating with had a really difficult time because of their closures and all that. Anybody else wants to share? I have a question for Tim, if you're still there, Tim. The money that has not been spent because of shutdown for the universities, can that some of the money that's been accumulating, for example, not being used, can that be repurposed for supporting additional grad students, minority students? How much flexibility there is in terms of repurposing those type of funds, and should that be worked with by speaking to the program officers?
Sure, I can speak to that in general. I think if you were, for folks who were at the presentation from DGA and DIAS yesterday, there's inherent inbuilt into the award structure. There's a lot of flexibility for rebudgeting to adapt to changing circumstances, to changing needs, and so that does apply to these awards as well. When you're talking about substantial shifts, I think the framework or the perspective that the EPSCoR program officers will bring to it is what are the implications for the scope of your project. And so the Track 1 awards and to an increasing degree, the Track 2 awards have strategic implementation plans. They lay out really clearly what the scope of the activities are supposed to be. Those are living documents where if you're moving in a different direction, you work with NSF to make sure we understand those changes and agree with those changes. When there's changes in budget, that's the question that we will typically ask is what does this mean for the scope of your project? What is it? What were you planning to do that you might not be doing anymore? What new opportunities are you taking advantage of? And we're really flexible with that in general, and we've been even more flexible, I think, with that in the COVID environment. We understand that there's been serious impacts to a lot of your planned activities, and that you've done an incredible job collectively at adapting to that and making the best of the circumstances, as we've heard today. And so when that has implications for the budget and you talk to us, we definitely want to work with you. We still have rules we have to follow. We still have records that we have to keep. And so there might be some documentation, there might be some follow-up questions, but we really do want to work with you to make the best of the circumstances and make these projects as successful as they can be in this environment.
Great, thank you so much. I see that the clock that I have at least is showing 1:59, and I know that 2 o'clock there is another session. So I want to thank you all for joining this session, for all the presenters, and I want to thank Tim as well as Loretta for organizing this.